Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. I'm currently in Brisbane on a very wet and rainy day for us. I am on the land of the Turrbal people, so I would like to acknowledge that and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We do have an action-packed event for today, so we are going to be going through some roles across Australia before looking at a role in New Zealand and also one in the UK. I'm very pleased to say we're going to be joined by a senior economist from Indeed, Callam Pickering, who's going to share his insights into the current state of the labour market and possibly for some predictions of what we should expect for this year, before going into our latest Twitter poll to see what the sentiment is like in the market at the moment. So getting straight into it, going to our job section, we can look at the roles. So we have a logistics coordinator role in Adelaide. This is on a temporary basis, hence the $35 an hour rate. If you are interested to find out more about this role, of course, contact the details there at the bottom, Emma Pottinger. Please be aware you can just visit our website if you don't manage to take a very quick screenshot of what's come up on your screen. Our next role is in the legal sector, so a legal assistant based in Melbourne, permanent basis, so 70 to 80,000. Again, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see you can contact Katie Dean, who's based obviously in our Melbourne office. And if you can't find the details, go straight to our website. We also have a role based over in the UK. We do have an office there for those who might not be aware. We've got a project manager role based in London, 45,000 to 52,000 pounds, of course. To contact us to find out more, you can see the details there with Hannah, and she can be reached, obviously, if you get your time zones right, on the number below.
Kia ora candidates and job seekers. I am thrilled to announce that Frog Recruitment have officially partnered up this week with an established cleaning services company who are ready to welcome a telemarketing professional into their team. The day-to-day in this role would involve lead generation, following up with prospects over calls, emails, successfully setting up meetings for the internal sales and operations team. This is an excellent role for someone who has some amount of telemarketing experience, is comfortable over the phone, handles rejections like a champ, and can objection handle. If you're wanting to get into the world of sales, this is an extraordinary opportunity. Get in touch with me, please, on the information below. Talk to you soon.
Hi, Callam, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. I'm excited to go through a couple of questions, and I think the most obvious one to start off with is the latest news we have around the unemployment rate and what your take might be on that. Is this something you expected? Did the number come out as you thought?
Well, the number was a little bit of a shock for a lot of economists and people in markets. We were expecting an unemployment rate of maybe around 4%. We got a 4.1% rate. But I think the most notable part was the fact that employment really wasn't increasing at all to begin the year. And that was a bit of a surprise as well. So overall, what we're seeing is that the labour market is still quite tight by historical standards. An unemployment rate of 4.1% is very healthy, but conditions are easing. Back in September, the unemployment rate was 3.6%, so it's increased by half a percentage point since then. And there is an expectation that the unemployment rate is going to gradually increase over the course of this year as well. The latest forecast from the Reserve Bank of Australia points to an unemployment rate of around 4.3% by the end of the year and by 4.4% by the end of next year. So there is that expectation that labour market conditions are going to continue to ease going forward.
And do you think as a job seeker, and of course there could be several watching this at the moment, that's going to have a notable difference? I know that's a very broad question, but when looking for a new role, how do you think it might look and feel if we get to where we're predicted to get to for the unemployment rate?
Well, certainly from a job seeker perspective, you love a tight labour market. You love it when it's difficult for businesses to find talent, because it gives you a little bit more bargaining power in terms of wages or benefits or conditions or where you work, whether it be from home or in the office, so things like that. So the fact that the unemployment rate is increasing is obviously not a great sign for job seekers. Now, that said, there are still a lot of jobs out there. Mm-hmm. So, for example, on Indeed, looking at the latest figures we have, job postings on the website are around 69% above pre-pandemic levels. Mm-hmm. They're down by around 30% from their peak, but there are still an incredible number of job opportunities available across the country. So if you are a job seeker looking for that next opportunity, those opportunities are still out there. What we're seeing is that the job vacancy rate is still around twice what was considered normal before the pandemic began. Mm-hmm. So there still is it can still be quite challenging for a lot of businesses to find staff as well. So skill shortages are still quite prevalent across the nation. So while the higher unemployment rate, not desirable from a job seeker perspective, there still are those opportunities. And I still think it's a bit of a job seeker favourable market at the moment.
Yeah, I think I would certainly agree. From what we see on the ground, it's very much still candidate short market, still hard to find good people, slight easing. And I think the thing that I would mention that does come up is some hurrying can be around sentiment. And when you see the latest news articles, headlines that come up, for instance, the UK recession or whatever might be happening in the US, and there's quite a bit of noise around that, how open or how much of an impact do you think that has here in Australia when there is these other big global things happening? How much do you think that it impacts Australia? Do you think we're relatively isolated, or what impact do you say it have?
Well, the Australian economy is a relatively small economy, which is obviously influenced by global factors. We're not immune to that, but we can often prove to be quite resilient. The Australian job market at the moment looks very different from, say, the UK. As I noted before, Indeed job postings for Australia are up 69% compared to pre-pandemic levels. In the UK, they're actually below pre-pandemic levels. So there's been a big gap there in terms of job creation throughout the recovery. And we continue to perform at a much higher level in terms of just job volumes. So we do appear to be holding up a lot better than some of the other major markets that Indeed operates in. And that suggests that the economy and the labour market is probably going to prove to be a little bit more resilient here. We are seeing in some other countries, such as the UK, where obviously, recessionary risks are very real. I don't think that's a conversation we're really having in Australia, because it is quite challenging for a lot of people out there. There isn't that sense that we're dealing with a recession.
And thinking about the UK side of things in their news, we've got record levels of migration. Do you think we might find ourselves with a more of an influx than we do already with migrants moving to Australia for work?
Well, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, we've had very strong population growth over the past year. Australia's population aged 15 and over increased by 3%, which is the highest, basically, I think, since World War II. So it's quite unusual. My sense is that migration levels or migration flows are likely to come off from where they currently are, in large part because we're probably done catching up from the pandemic, where borders were closed and no one could enter the country. Whether it sort of settles at a rate that is still above normal, I think that's going to be the key question. Also important is going to be the conversation we have around migration. So I get the sense that it's going to be quite a hot political issue leading to the next federal election, because there is concerns around cost of living, housing prices, and all those sort of things, and migration sort of fits in there as well. So there's going to be a lot of conversation around whether migration is too high or not. And certainly that could trigger a rethink in how the federal government approaches that.
Great. And just lastly, any further predictions for what we can expect for this year?
Well, I think we obviously have a very challenging economic environment. Economic growth is likely to be relatively weak, but the labour market still continues to do okay.
Mhm.
I tend to agree with the Reserve Bank of Australia and Federal Treasury in the sense that I think the unemployment rate will continue to rise, but I'm not anticipating a sharp increase at the moment. I think the forward-looking measures that we look at, like job vacancies or the jobs that we're seeing on Indeed, remain really healthy. And that's going to support employment going forward. So I'm somewhat optimistic about our prospects for the year.
Great. Fantastic. Appreciate your time. Of course, we've got some details there around obviously your contact details, and I believe that's the website for Indeed as well. So please do look to visit that. A lot of jobs there to have a look at, and as we continue to see a tight labour market. So thanks very much, Callam. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So going to our last segment. So we have a Twitter poll, which we regularly look at, and this gives us a bit of an update of where things might be happening with the sentiment. So you can see on the screen there, given the current market, do you think now is a good time to look for a new job? Yes, I'm looking now. No, I'm waiting. So if we could get some responses to that, just popping up, would be very interesting to see where that will land. I think, as we're mentioning, it can be around the sentiment that comes up. So when we were able to look through what we see, we do measure that on a regular basis, be able to share with you and see what's happening out there in the market.